Do you see it? Like a endless river flows through every corner of our lives. It flows from your wallet, through the hands of a vendor, and then to places you'd never imagine. Everyone sees it flow, but how many truly know where it originates? If money could talk, would you dare to listen to its true story? Behind its glittering shine, behind every number in a bank account, there might be a story you'd never think of. A story tainted with sin, deception, and history. Because in every civilization, ancient or modern, there exists clean money and dirty money. And the biggest question is, how to turn dirty money into clean money. That's the question that has haunted humanity for centuries. This isn't just a matter of crime. It's a complex story, intertwined with law, ethics, and human ingenuity. Today, we'll embark on a journey through a special river, the river of laundered money. From medieval merchants and infamous pirates to audacious mafiosos and modern hackers, you'll hear secrets few dare to speak, the sophisticated tricks performed in the shadows. And after hearing it all, you might look at the bills in your wallet with a completely different perspective. If you enjoy mysterious stories and want to learn more, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts on this story. Dirty money in the Middle Ages. When the church shut the doors, before we dive headfirst into the financial intrigues of the Middle Ages where kings, popes, and merchants played the money laundering game as if it were a high art form. With contracts more convoluted than a Shakespearean plot, let's pause for a moment to clarify the concept of dirty money. Because without it, you might mistake this for a recipe for sneaky financial soup, where the main ingredient is deception, the spice is greed, and the topping is a dash of prison risk. Dirty money, or dirty money in English, is simply cash earned from illegal or opaque activities. That's money from theft, smuggling, corruption, fraud, drug trafficking, or even selling unlicensed chewing gum in some overly strict places. It's not literally dirty money like bills that fell into a puddle or got ink stained, but money poisoned by its criminal origins. In other words, dirty money is like a shiny apple on the outside, gleaming in the sunlight, full of worms and pesticides inside. It looks delicious and easy to swallow, but if you bite into it, you'll get bitten back by the law, tax authorities, or even your own conscience. To make it clearer, think about its essence. Dirty money isn't just naughty cash, it's money, born in the shadows, from deals society deems taboo. It could be a few bucks from picking up a dropped wallet on the street, or millions from a criminal empire. The biggest problem isn't earning it, but figuring out how to spend it without getting caught. That's why the concept of money laundering was born. A classic three-step process: placement, layering, and finally integration. The result? Dirty money turns into clean money, like a thief slipping into an Armani suit and calling himself a successful entrepreneur. But don't get too dreamy. Most folks who try this end up on a free vacation to federal prison. Now, to illustrate, let's imagine some examples, and I promise to keep them humorous, even if they might make you laugh until you cry thinking about the real-world fallout. First, a modern, relatable one. You're a street pickpocket in the 21st century who just harvested $1,000 from a unlucky tourist's wallet in Times Square, New York. That's dirty money, not because it stinks, but because it comes from theft. If you try using it to buy a new iPhone at an Apple store, the bank or IRS might sniff out the dirt through suspicious transactions, turning your life into an action movie like Catch Me If You Can, but with a not-so-happy ending. You're the star, and the cops are the director. Or picture a drug lord in Colombia, raking in a fortune from green plants, not the eco-friendly kind like organic fruit trees, but cannabis or coca turned into cocaine. Drug trafficking is one of the world's biggest sources of dirty money, generating hundreds of billions of dollars a year, enough to buy a private island. His cash could snag a luxury yacht with an infinity pool, a beachfront villa with its own helicopter pad, or even a soccer team with star players. But if the IRS or D gets a whiff, that yacht becomes a tax bureau yacht, ferrying him straight to jail, where the infinity pool is a shared cell and the star players are buff cellmates. And don't forget the most hilarious historical example: money from bootlegging during America's Prohibition era. Back then, alcohol was totally banned. But mafia bosses like Al Capone made millions smuggling booze from Canada across the border and selling it in secret bars called speakeasies. That money was so dirty that Capone had to launder it through laundromats, not actually washing clothes, but using them as fronts to fake revenue reports, turning bootleg booze cash into clean shirts on the accounting books. The outcome: Capone got busted not for bootlegging, but for tax evasion, a timeless lesson that dirty money can be laundered, but the tax man doesn't let up. Will chase you like a hound after a rabbit. Another classic. Adventure-packed example is pirate money. Gold and silver plundered from Spanish ships in the 16th, 18th centuries. Notorious pirates like Blackbeard or Henry Calico Jack Rackham looted glittering treasures from galleon ships loaded with gold from Peru's mines. That gold was dirty like sand-caked seashells stained with traces of violence, robbery, and naval warfare. To spend it without getting hanged by the Spanish or British royals, they had to launder it by investing in legit trade, like buying shares in the British East India Company for spice runs, or swapping gold for bills of exchange at ports like Port Royal, Jamaica. Result: stolen gold becomes profits from tea and silk trading spotless on paper. But one legal storm from the Royal Navy, and that treasure sinks into a sea of prison bars, like the Black Pearl ship in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but without a Jack Sparrow to bail you out. Digging deeper, dirty money can come from countless sources, each with its own flavor. Corruption cash. A politician takes a multi-million-dollar bribe to greenlight a bridge project, then uses it to buy overseas real estate. Dirty money morphs into legit investment assets, or Ponzi scheme loot. A scammer promises 20% monthly returns to lure investors, but really just uses newbies' cash to pay off the old ones, building an illusion of wealth until the whole empire crumbles like a sandcastle. Then there's money from human trafficking or illegal arms dealing, or even underground gambling, all dirty money that demands slick tricks to beautify. And don't overlook smuggling profits, like medieval spices or colonial opium stuff, that's dirty not just for being illegal, but for ruining countless lives. In short, dirty money is the nomad of the financial world. It wanders from criminals' pockets to banks, from cash-stuffed suitcases to offshore accounts, always trying to disguise itself as clean money through tricks like real estate investments, shell companies, or even charitable donations. It's called all sorts of names: booty, loot, or pillage, terms that hark back to pirate and wartime days. But don't worry, we're not here to judge or preach, just to chuckle at the cleverness of folks trying to turn mud into gold, and learn how it's traveled through history, from medieval gold coins to today's Bitcoin. Now, with the concept of dirty money crystal clear, let's rewind time to the Middle Ages, an era shaped by two great powers, the Crown and the Church. In this context, the Catholic Church not only dominated spiritual life, but also imposed strict rules on the economy, especially financial activities. Let's find out how people of this period cleverly circumvented religious barriers to launder dirty money, and how these tricks laid the foundation for the modern financial system. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was the center of European social life. With absolute power, the Church not only shaped morality, but also controlled economic activities. One of their most prominent doctrines was the Prohibition of usura, the act of making money from money, or in other words, charging interest on loans. According to the Church, money was merely a tool for exchange, not something to generate profit. Only honest labor, such as farming, crafting, or trading goods, was considered a legitimate way to create wealth. This canon law originated from biblical texts, such as Exodus 22:25. If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. The Church believed that charging interest was an act of exploitation, contrary to the spirit of Christian charity. However, the reality of life was much more complex. As commerce began to flourish around the 12th, 13th centuries, with trade routes connecting Europe to the Middle East and Asia, the demand for capital and financial activities became urgent. Merchants needed to borrow money to buy goods, invest in overseas voyages, or expand their business networks. So how could they meet this need without violating canon law? The answer lay in creativity. Merchants, bankers, and especially powerful families like the Medici in Florence found sophisticated ways to circumvent the law. They didn't call interest, but instead used terms like service fees, exchange fees, or even shipping fees. These tricks not only helped them avoid punishment from the church, but also laid the foundation for the modern banking industry. The Medici family is one of the most prominent examples of how medieval bankers turned dirty money into clean money, originating from Florence, a bustling commercial center in Italy. The Medici were not only excellent financiers, but also patrons of art, culture, and even popes. But to achieve that status, they had to face a major challenge: how to profit from financial activities while maintaining the church's approval. Imagine a typical scenario. A merchant in Florence wants to borrow 1 gold coins from the Medici bank to buy silk from the Middle East. According to canon law, the Medici cannot charge interest. Instead, they would draft a complex contract in which the loan was accompanied by a service fee or risk fee. For example, the merchant would repay 120 gold coins. But the extra 20 gold coins were not called interest, but rather a cost to compensate for the bank's risk, time, and effort. Another trick was the bill of exchange, of financial instrument that allowed merchants to make payments in another location with a different currency. In the process of currency conversion, the Medici could add an extra fee, thereby concealing the actual profit. A real-life example. In the 15th century, Medici Bank sponsored trading voyages along the Silk Road. They not only provided capital, but also organized currency exchange services between different currencies, such as the Florentine florin and the Venetian ducat. In this process, they charged an exchange fee higher than the actual value, and this fee was the disguised interest. In this way, the Medici not only made a profit, but also expanded their network of influence across Europe. But it wasn't just the Medici. Many other banking families, such as the Bardi and Perizzi, used similar tactics. They often collaborated with major trade fairs in Champagne or Venice, where financial transactions were bustling and difficult to control. Here, merchants could launder money by buying and selling goods or reinvesting in legitimate business activities. Medieval trade fairs, like the Champagne fairs or the fairs in Venice, were not just places for exchanging goods, but also centers for financial activities. This was where money from illicit sources such as spice smuggling, slave trading, or even robbery was laundered in a sophisticated way. Imagine a slave trader arriving at the Venice Fair with a suitcase full of gold. This money came from selling slaves on the black market, an activity the church considered immoral. To legalize this money, he would use it to buy a lot of spices, like black pepper or saffronat, a price higher than the market rate. He would then resell this lot of spices at a slightly lower price. But the money he received was now considered legitimate revenue from the spice trade. This was a primitive but extremely effective form of money laundering. Spices, in the Middle Ages, were one of the most valuable commodities. A pound of black pepper could be worth a year's wages for a laborer. Therefore, using spices as a money laundering tool was not only logical, but also very difficult to detect, as these transactions were often carried out in the chaotic atmosphere of the fairs, where hundreds of merchants from all over flocked. Another example is silk merchants from the Middle East. They often carried cash from questionable transactions, such as smuggling or tax evasion. To hide the origin of the money, they invested in large merchant guilds, where the money was mixed with revenue from other legitimate activities. A complex trade contract could include dozens of small transactions, making it almost impossible to trace the source of the money. In addition to using service fees and fairs, medieval bankers also created many other ways to launder money. One of them was the letter of credit, a financial instrument that allowed payments to be made in different locations. For example, a merchant in Florence could sign a letter of credit to pay a partner in Bruges. In this process, fees and exchange rates were adjusted to conceal the actual profit. Another trick was to invest in charities or sponsor the church. Many wealthy merchants, after earning money from not entirely legitimate activities, would donate a large portion of their wealth to the church or build public works such as cathedrals and hospitals. This not only helped them launder money, but also strengthened their reputation and social status. The Medici family, for instance, were major sponsors of many artistic and religious works in Florence, including the famous Duomo Cathedral. Think of it as a two-in-one strategy, legalizing assets while building the image of a model citizen. A more mundane example. If you have a questionable sum of money, you can open a grocery store, report a higher than actual revenue, and gradually turn the dirty money into legitimate revenue. This is exactly how medieval bankers operated, but on a much larger and more complex scale. The money laundering tricks of the Middle Ages may seem simple, but they laid the foundation for many modern financial techniques. Concepts like service fees, bills of exchange, and investing in legitimate projects are still used today, albeit in more sophisticated forms. For example, shell companies today can use front companies or investment funds to hide the origin of money. The service fees or management fees you see on bills today may be direct descendants of the tricks the Medici family once used. Think about this. The next time you see a transaction fee on your banking app or a service bill, ask yourself, could this be a modern version of what medieval bankers once did? Maybe we're not so different from the merchants in Florence or Venice from centuries ago. So what do you think? The service fees or management fees we encounter today, truly descendants of medieval tricks? Or do you know another historical story about how people circumvented the law to legalize money? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you're fascinated by the secrets behind money, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to continue this journey of discovery with us. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into the Renaissance, when banks began to surpass the church in shaping the global financial system. Pirates, empires, and smuggled gold. Welcome back to our journey exploring the mysterious flow of money. After leaving the ancient cathedrals, the nascent banks, the secret trading rooms of medieval Florence, today we'll set sail across the Atlantic Ocean, entering the 16th-18th centuries, the golden age of pirates, smuggled gold, and greedy empires vying for power. This was an era where the treasures plundered from Spanish ships, the massive gold mines in the New World, and the native civilizations like the Aztec and Inca created huge flows of illicit money. But how could this dirty gold and silver become clean in the eyes of society? Let's explore the audacious money laundering schemes of pirates, merchants, and powerful empires, along with detailed historical facts and profound financial lessons from this turbulent period. The 16th century opened the age of exploration. When European empires led by Spain and Portugal rushed to the Americas to exploit resources, the gold mines in Mexico and the silver mines in Peru, along with the treasures plundered from native civilizations like the Aztec and Inca, turned the New World into a money-printing machine for Europe. According to historical records, from 15 to 18, Spain transported about 180 tons of gold and 160 tons of silver from the Americas back home, equivalent to hundreds of billions of US dollars today. This wealth came not only from mining but also from plunder, the enslavement of native populations, and brutal exploitation. However, plundered gold and silver could not be used immediately without arousing suspicion. A ship full of gold from Peru arriving in Seville, or would attract the attention of the Catholic Church. Rival nations like England or France and the legal system of the time, the Church, with its immense moral authority, often condemned acts of plunder not disguised by the pretense of spreading Christianity. Rival nations were quick to accuse Spain to justify their own naval attacks or piracy. Therefore, both empires and pirates needed sophisticated methods to launder this gold and silver, turning them into legitimate assets that could be spent openly without being questioned about their origin. Moreover, the transportation and management of this enormous amount of gold and silver also posed many challenges. The Spanish galleons, known as the Flota de Indias, were constantly attacked by pirates and rival nations. It's estimated that about 20% of the gold and silver transported from the New World was lost on the way back to Europe. due to pirates, storms, or accidents. This forced empires to develop more complex financial and commercial systems to protect and legalize their assets. Imagine you're a notorious pirate captain in the Caribbean, like Henry Morgan Blackbeard or Anne Bonny, with a chest full of gold, silver, pearls, and jewels plundered from a Spanish galleon. These ships, laden with wealth from the colonies, were the ideal targets for pirates throughout the 17th and early 18th centuries. But after plundering the treasure, how could you use it without being hunted down and hanged by the authorities? One of the most common ways was to cooperate with merchants in major ports like Port Royal, Nassau, or Tortuga. These places were havens for pirates, where laws were lax and corruption was rampant. The merchants there acted as intermediaries, helping pirates launder money through commercial transactions. For example, a pirate captain would bring gold to a merchant in Seville or Amsterdam. Instead of exchanging the gold directly, the merchant would give him a bill of exchange or a certificate of ownership of a merchant ship, a shipment of spices, or even a piece of land. The dirty gold was now replaced by a legitimate asset. The pirate could use these documents to buy land, invest in commerce, or even start a new life as a wealthy merchant. Historical example: Henry Morgan, one of the most successful pirates, used his spoils to buy land in Jamaica and eventually became the island's deputy governor. He collaborated with local merchants to turn plundered gold into legitimate assets, such as plantations and real estate, thereby washing his pirate past clean. Another trick was to invest in large trading companies, such as the Dutch East India Company or the British East India Company. These were powerful organizations operating like economic empires, controlling the trade of spices, tea, silk, and luxury goods from Asia and India. Pirates could use their plundered gold to buy shares in these companies. When the company generated profits from legitimate business activities, the money received would become clean money, with no trace of its illicit origin. This is a classic form of money laundering, turning illicit assets into profits from a legitimate business. Imagine a scenario. A pirate, after a fierce battle in the Caribbean, brings back a chest full of pearls, gold bars, and silver coins. He docks in Port Royal, walks into a smoky tavern, and meets a mysterious merchant. This merchant agrees to exchange the treasure chest for an investment contract in the Dutch East India Company. A few months later, the pirate receives a large sum of money from the profits of the spice and silk trade. With this money, he buys a mansion in London, living like a nobleman, with no one knowing the money was once spoils from a stolen Spanish ship. This isn't just fiction. Many pirates actually did this to hide the origin of their wealth. Some pirates chose to hide their treasure instead of laundering it immediately. Remote islands in the Caribbean, like Oak Island in Nova Scotia or Cocos Island in Costa Rica, became ideal places to bury gold and silver. However, this hiding wasn't just to protect the treasure, but also a long-term strategy. Some pirates would return years later after going straight or acquiring a new identity, to dig up the treasure and mix it into legitimate activities. Some treasures, like the legendary treasure of Captain Kidd, are believed to still be hidden somewhere, inspiring countless stories and treasure hunts. If pirates laundered money on an individual or small group scale, European empires like Spain, England, France, and the Netherlands did it on a much larger scale. They not only plundered resources from the colonies, but also developed complex systems to legalize this wealth. In the 16th century, Spain plundered tons of gold and silver from the Inca Empire in Peru, especially during the conquest by Francisco Pizarro. For example, in 1532, Pizarro captured the Inca king Atahualpa and demanded a colossal ransom: one room full of gold and 2 rooms full of silver. After receiving the ransom, Spain still killed Atahualpa and continued plundering. To legalize this gold, Spain declared it as spoils of legitimate conquests, carried out in the name of spreading Christianity and expanding the empire. A portion of the gold and silver was sent to the Catholic Church as donations or tithes, helping to solidify the empire's moral image. The rest was invested in commercial activities, such as sponsoring trading fleets, building infrastructure, or paying for wars in Europe. Furthermore, Spain developed a system called the Casa de en Seville, which acted as an agency managing the import of gold and silver from the New World. This system helped track and legalize the source of wealth by recording them as commercial revenue or official spoils. However, corruption in this system was widespread, as officials often accepted bribes to overlook the true origin of the gold and silver. The Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company are prime examples of institutional-level money laundering. These companies not only traded spices, tea, and silk, but also engaged in acts of plunder, such as seizing rival ships, attacking colonial ports, or exploiting resources from occupied territories. For example, the VOC once seized Portuguese ships in the Indian Ocean and plundered wealth from ports in Indonesia. This wealth was then mixed into the company's legitimate trading revenue. When shareholders received their profits, no one questioned the true origin of the money. The VOC also invented a pioneering financial instrument: publicly traded stocks. This was the first time in history that a company allowed investors to buy shares and receive dividends. This created an ideal mechanism for money laundering. Individuals, including pirates or smugglers, could invest illicit gold and silver into the VOC, then receive clean profits in the form of dividends. This system not only helped legalize wealth, but also spurred the development of the modern financial market. In addition to cooperating with merchants and investing in trading companies, pirates and empires also used many other methods to launder money, from buying land to sponsoring art. In Europe during this period, land was a symbol of power and wealth. Pirate could use his plundered gold to buy a plantation, a castle, or a large plot of land in England, France, or the Netherlands. He could then resell this asset or use it to generate legitimate revenue, such as collecting rent or farming. In this way, dirty money was converted into a fixed asset, no longer under suspicion. For example, Sir Francis Drake, a privateer sponsored by the English crown, used the spoils from his attacks on Spanish ships to buy land in England, thereby solidifying his social status. Bills of exchange and letters of credit, which originated in the Middle Ages with Italian bankers like the Medici family, became more common during this period. Pirate could exchange his plundered gold for a bill of exchange from a bank in Amsterdam or London. This bill of exchange was then used to pay for transactions in other cities, such as Lisbon or Paris. In the process of conversion, the origin of the money was completely hidden. This system was particularly useful because it allowed pirates to operate on an international scale without having to carry heavy gold and silver. Just like the Medici family in the Middle Ages, many reformed pirates and wealthy merchants invested in art, culture, and religion to launder money and build their reputation. For example, a pirate might donate money to build a church, a school, or sponsor a famous artist. These actions not only helped legalize wealth, but also turned them into respected philanthropists. Henry Morgan, after becoming deputy governor of Jamaica, invested in public works to solidify his image. Similarly, empires often sponsored grand cathedrals or works of art to conceal the origin of plundered wealth. Corruption was a key tool in money laundering during this period. Port officials, judges, and even noblemen were often bribed to overlook the origin of gold and silver. For example, in Port Royal, governors and customs officials often received a share of the pirate spoils to allow them to trade freely. This system created a network of protection, allowing pirates and merchants to operate without fear of prosecution. The money laundering tricks of the pirate and imperial eras are not just dramatic adventure stories. They show that money laundering is not just a problem of individual crime, but also a tool of major political and economic powers. European empires used war, trade, and religion to legalize plundered wealth, while pirates relied on merchants, large companies, and corruption to turn dirty gold into clean money. These techniques have many similarities with modern money laundering methods. Today, criminal organizations use front companies, invest in real estate, or make charitable donations to hide the origin of money. Investment funds, stock markets, and even cryptocurrencies can be used in a similar way to how the East India Company once operated. Perhaps pirate movies like Pirates of the Caribbean don't just tell stories of sea battles, but also contain profound financial lessons. if we are willing to look deeper into the economic aspect. Moreover, the pirate era also demonstrates the power of financial systems in shaping society. The development of bills of exchange, stocks, and trading companies like the VOC laid the foundation for the modern financial market. However, these systems also created opportunities for illicit activities, a problem we are still facing today with tax havens and shadowy financial organizations. What do you think about the money laundering tricks of pirates and empires? Should the pirate movies we love portray this financial aspect to be more realistic? Or do you know any stories about stolen treasures and how they were legalized? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. In the next part, we'll enter the modern era when banks, global financial institutions, and digital technology take money laundering to a new level. The birth of modern banking tricks. Welcome back to our journey exploring the mysterious flow of money. In the last part, we crossed the ocean with pirates and empires. Today, we'll step into the 19th century, the age of the Industrial Revolution. When machines changed the world and European empires expanded their power through colonial exploitation, this was an era where money laundering was no longer crude tricks under the guise of religion or simple commerce, but had become a sophisticated industry supported by the development of modern banking, shell corporations, and tax havens. Dirty money now came from the immense profits of opium smuggling, slave labor, and colonial resource exploitation. Let's explore how these tricks shaped the global financial system with detailed historical stories and extensive research. The 19th century was a period of explosive growth for the Industrial Revolution. It began in Britain and spread throughout Europe. Inventions like the steam engine, railways, and textile factories changed the way people produced and conducted business. However, behind this progress was the dark side of exploitation. Child labor, harsh working hours, and especially the exploitation of colonies. Empires like Britain, France, and Belgium expanded their territories to exploit resources from rubber in the Congo to cotton in India and used slave or forced labor. According to research, Britain transported about 3.1 million African slaves to the Caribbean from the 17th to 19th centuries, generating huge profits from sugar, coffee, and tobacco plantations. These funds needed to be laundered to be invested in industrial projects at home, without arousing suspicion from the government or public opinion. The development of the commercial banking system and the gold standard complicated the task of hiding the origin of money. Merchants and empires had to find ways to turn illicit profits into legitimate investment. Capital through complex commercial transactions. Banks of this era, like the Bank of England, played a central role in international money transfers, opening up opportunities for money laundering on an unprecedented scale. The development of global trade in the 19th century made it easier to transfer money between countries. This created a great opportunity for those who wanted to hide the origin of their assets. One of the most important tools was shell companies, entities that exist only on paper, with no real business operations, but possessing all the legal documents to receive and transfer money. These companies were often located in tax havens, where laws were lax and information about ownership was kept strictly confidential. The history of shell companies dates back to the late 19th century, when states like New Jersey and Delaware in the US began allowing the formation of companies without requiring real business operations to attract investment. In Europe and the British colonies, places like the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and the British Virgin Islands became tax havens with low tax rates and high levels of secrecy. Banks there did not require customers to provide details about the origin of their money, facilitating money laundering from smuggling, colonial exploitation, or slavery. Imagine a British merchant who made millions of pounds from smuggling opium in China. Couldn't bring that money to London and deposit it in a bank without being questioned. Instead, he transferred the money to a shell company on a remote island like Bermuda. From there, the money was sent back to London under the guise of investment profits or revenue from a real estate project. Through a complex chain of transactions, the dirty money was mixed with clean money, becoming legitimate in the eyes of the law. A similar real-life example is the Mobilier scandal in the U.S. The Union Pacific Railroad Company used the construction company Mobilier to inflate the cost of building the Transcontinental Railroad, transferring illicit profits to shareholders through cheap stock. These tricks not only helped launder money, but also turned criminals into respectable investors who contributed to building symbols of progress like the railway. Shell companies and tax havens became powerful tools in the 19th century. In British colonies like Bermuda or the British Virgin Islands, banks and local authorities facilitated secret financial transactions. These places attracted investment from all over the world thanks to low taxes and high secrecy. For example, in the Caribbean, Britain exploited slaves to produce sugar and coffee, generating profits that accounted for up to 10% of Britain's GDP. This money was transferred through shell companies on islands like the Caymans to avoid taxes and control, then invested in factories, railways, or real estate in Britain. In India, Britain controlled the cultivation of cotton and opium, using the profits to finance the empire. Money from these activities was transferred through shell companies and tax havens, concealing its illicit origin and turning it into legitimate investment capital. Major banks like Barings, Bank, and HSBC played a key role in facilitating international money transfers, sometimes deliberately ignoring the origin of the money. A particularly interesting story is about the opium smuggling in China. British merchants, under the protection of the East India Company, sold opium from India to China, earning large amounts of silver and goods. The explosive growth of the opium trade caused widespread addiction in China, leading to the Opium Wars and a reversal of the trade balance from a Chinese surplus to a profit for Britain. To legalize this money, they used it to buy tea and silk commodities that were in high demand in Europe. Imagine a ship full of opium going to China. When it returned, it was full of tea and silk. On paper, all transactions were legitimate. The sale of opium was hidden under the guise of commerce, and the profits from tea silk were clean money. For example, in 1830, Britain imported about 30 million pounds of tea from China, most of which was financed by opium profits. In this way, dirty money was converted into clean money through a chain of legitimate transactions. Similarly, in the Caribbean, money from slave labor in sugar, coffee, and tobacco farming was laundered by investing in industry in Britain. These funds not only built railways, but also sponsored public works, schools, and even charitable campaigns, helping merchants launder their reputation. The tricks of the 19th century laid the foundation for modern money laundering methods. Shell companies and tax havens still exist, with an estimated 10% of global GDP hidden in offshore accounts. Scandals like the Panama Papers show that shell companies continue to be used to hide corrupt money, smuggling, or tax evasion, similar to how 19th century merchants did. Are today's large corporations using similar tricks to optimize profits, just like John did with the railways? These techniques show that money laundering is not just a problem of individual crime, but also a tool of empires and large corporations. They helped build symbols of progress like railways and factories, but also left a legacy of inequality and exploitation in the colonies. What do you think about the money laundering tricks of the 19th century? Are today's large corporations using shell companies or tax havens to hide profits? Or do you know more historical stories about how dirty money was legalized? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. In the next part, we'll step into the 20th century when world wars and mafia organizations took money laundering to a new level. Stay tuned. The Prohibition era and the golden age of the Mafia. If the 19th century was the stage for sophisticated merchants and cunning empires, then in the 20th century, the spotlight shifted to the Mafia bosses, the masters of the art of money laundering. This was the period when the term money laundering officially came into being, becoming a common term, and was elevated into a complex underground financial system. In this part, we'll explore how mafia gangs, led by notorious names like Al Capone, turned dirty money from bootlegging into clean money through legitimate businesses, and how these tricks shaped the modern world of financial crime. In 1920, The U.S. Congress passed the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act, banning the production, sale, and transport of alcohol nationwide. Instead of ending alcohol consumption, this law inadvertently opened a gold mine for the criminal underworld. Mafia gangs quickly seized the opportunity, building criminal empires based on bootlegging, operating secret bars, and distributing illicit alcohol across the U.S. Among them, Al Capone, the mafia boss in Chicago, was the most prominent name. With the nickname Scarface, Capone controlled a vast network including illegal distilleries, hundreds of speakeasies, and alcohol supply routes from Canada and Mexico into the U.S. At the peak of his career, Al Capone's organization was estimated to earn about $1 million a year from bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, and extortion. However, this massive amount of money posed a major problem. It was mostly cash. Suitcases, underground vaults, and secret stashes filled with dollars could not be used openly without arousing suspicion. If Capone used this money to buy mansions, luxury cars, or invest in legitimate businesses, the IRS or the federal police would immediately ask, where did this money come from? This simple question was the biggest threat to Capone's empire, as it could lead to investigations into the origin of his wealth. Furthermore, during this period, the banking system in the U.S. began to be more tightly regulated. Banks required clear records of the source of funds when accepting large deposits, and unusual transactions could be reported to the authorities. This forced mafia bosses to find a way to launder the money, i.e., to make the illicit funds look like revenue from legitimate activities. The term money laundering is believed to have originated during the Prohibition era. Inspired by how mafia gangs used legitimate businesses like laundromats to hide the origin of their money. The idea was simple but effective. Put dirty money from illicit activities into a legitimate business, then withdraw it as clean money through transactions reported as legal. This process is often described through three main steps: placement, layering, and integration. The first step is to place the dirty money into the financial system. Mafia gangs chose cash-intensive businesses, such as laundromats, restaurants, bars, or casinos, because it's difficult to verify their actual revenue. For example, a laundromat in Chicago might only have a few customers a day, earning a few dozen dollars. However, the mafia would report that this laundromat had hundreds of customers with revenues of thousands of dollars. The dirty money from bootlegging was mixed into this revenue, then deposited into the bank as legitimate earnings. To hide the origin, the mafia used complex transactions to layer the dirty money. For example, they might transfer money through multiple bank accounts, invest in other businesses, or buy and sell assets like real estate or cars. Each transaction created a layer of cover that made tracing the source of the money more difficult. Some bosses even sent money abroad to Canada or the Caribbean, where laws were more lax. Before bringing the money back to the U.S. as a legitimate investment, in the final step, the dirty money was cleaned and could be used openly. For example, a mafia boss could use the clean money to buy mansions, invest in the stock market, or finance political activities. At this point, no one could prove that the money came from bootlegging or other illicit activities. Imagine a small laundromat in downtown Chicago in 1925. A customer brings a shirt to be laundered, paying $1. In the laundromat's ledger, this transaction is recorded not just as one shirt being washed, but as a special laundry service for many times the price, or even dozens of shirts that don't exist. At the end of the day, when the laundromat owner deposits the money into the bank, that money includes cash from bootlegging, gambling, or extortion. The bank only sees a deposit from a legitimate business, and the dirty money has been washed clean. Laundromats weren't the only option. Mafia gangs invested in any business that used cash as its primary method of transaction. Some examples include restaurants and bars. Speakeasies were not just places to sell illicit alcohol, but also ideal for money laundering. Revenue from illegal alcohol sales was reported as revenue from food or legitimate drinks. Casinos. Illegal casinos in Chicago and New York allowed the mafia to mix dirty money with customers' winnings then reported as legitimate revenue. Grocery stores and car washes, these small businesses could easily inflate revenue without arousing suspicion. As they dealt in cash and had a hard-to-verify customer base. In addition, the Mafia also used front companies to launder money. For example, they might establish a trucking company to disguise the transport of illicit alcohol. Revenue from this company was reported as money earned from transporting legitimate goods, when in fact most of it was from smuggling. Al Capone was not unintelligent. He knew that bootlegging transactions were done in the shadows, making it very difficult for the authorities to find direct evidence. However, Capone and other bosses did not anticipate a formidable opponent. The IRS, led by financial agent Frank J. Wilson. The IRS did not focus on proving Capone's bootlegging, but instead investigated his personal income. They found that Capone lived a lavish lifestyle, mansions, cars, jewelry, but did not report any income for tax purposes. In 1931, Al Capone was convicted of tax evasion, evidence showing he had earned millions of dollars but hadn't paid a dime in taxes. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison and had to pay a huge fine. This story is a classic lesson about the link between money laundering and tax evasion. When dirty money is legalized, it becomes part of taxable income. However, many mafia bosses, including Capone, believed that dirty money didn't need to be reported, and that was the mistake that led to their downfall. Capone's story also marked a turning point in how authorities dealt with financial crime. Instead of trying to prove illicit activities directly, law enforcement agencies began to focus on tracing the flow of money and tax violations. This method later became an important tool in the fight against organized crime. Let's delve into a fictional scenario that reflects the reality of this era. A customer walks into a laundromat on Chicago's South Side, paying $1 to have a shirt laundered. In the laundromat's ledger, this transaction is recorded as a special laundry service for $10, or even for 50 shirts washed that day, even though there were only a few customers. The dirty money from illegal alcohol sales, gambling, or extortion is mixed into the laundromat's revenue. When the owner deposits the money into the bank, it is recorded as legitimate revenue from laundry services. The bank has no way of knowing that most of this money came from illicit activities. This process didn't just happen at laundromats. Speakeasy could report revenue from legal beer sales, while in reality most of it was from illegal alcohol. A casino could record a customer's winnings, but it was actually money from extortion or prostitution. These businesses acted as money-washing machines, turning mountains of illicit cash into a legitimate cash flow entering the financial system. The Prohibition era not only enriched the Mafia, but also laid the foundation for modern money laundering techniques. The methods the Mafia used, such as using cash-intensive businesses, front companies, and complex transactions, are still applied by criminal organizations today, albeit on a larger scale, and with the support of technology. For example, modern criminal organizations may use cryptocurrency, offshore bank accounts, or international real estate to launder money, but the core idea still originates from the laundromats of 1920s Chicago. Moreover, the failure of the Prohibition Act shows that completely banning an industry can lead to the explosive growth of an underground market. This provides a lesson for modern governments when considering policies related to drugs, gambling, or other banned activities. Ultimately, the story of Al Capone and the Prohibition era shows the power of the financial system in shaping both the legal and illegal worlds. Legitimate businesses like laundromats and restaurants are not just places for commerce, but also tools to hide crime. Maybe the next time you take your clothes to the laundromat, you'll wonder if they're washing something other than clothes. Have you ever thought that a clean shirt or a beer in a bar could hide a complex financial story? Should mafia movies like The Godfather or Boardwalk Empire delve deeper into the aspect of money laundering to be more realistic? Or do you know any stories about underground activities during the Prohibition era? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you're fascinated by the secrets behind the flow of money, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to continue this journey of discovery with us. In the next part, we'll step into the world of modern banks, tax havens, and digital technology where money laundering reaches a new level. Offshore havens and the specter of globalization. After leaving the dark alleys of 1920s Chicago, where mafia bosses wash dirty money in laundromats, we step into a new era, the world of globalization and offshore tax havens. This is no longer the playground of pirates or street mafiosos, but a global financial game where corrupt politicians, tycoons, drug lords, and even terrorist organizations use sophisticated tools to hide the origin of money. In this part, we'll explore how tax havens like Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Panama became magical mirrors that turned dirty money into clean money, and how globalization has opened a new chapter for the art of money laundering. After World War II ended in 1945, the world was in chaos with devastated economies, collapsed dictatorships, and political conflicts erupting everywhere. In this context, Switzerland emerged as an ideal destination for illicit funds. With a history of neutrality in wars and a banking system protected by strict bank secrecy laws, Switzerland became a safe haven for money from various sources. From assets plundered from Jews by the Nazis, corrupt money from dictators, to money from drug smuggling and wars. Switzerland's bank secrecy law, strengthened by the Banking Act of 1934, stipulates that banks cannot disclose customer information, even at the request of foreign governments. The famous saying of Swiss banks' clients have secrets, banks have silence, has become a symbol of the system's invulnerability. This allowed individuals and organizations to send dirty money to Switzerland without fear of being traced. For example, a suitcase of cash from drug smuggling in South America could be transferred to a bank in Zurich. After a few transactions, such as buying stocks or transferring funds through intermediary accounts, the money was legalized as legitimate investment in real estate, companies, or financial funds. Switzerland not only attracted dirty money, but also became a center for legitimate financial activities, making the distinction between clean and dirty money even more difficult. Banks like UBS and Credit Suisse managed trillions of dollars in assets, a significant portion of which had murky origins. According to historical documents, in the 1960s, 1970s, billions of US dollars from criminal organizations and dictators like Ferdinand Marcos or Mobutu Sese Seko were sent to Switzerland for concealment. This system operated like a giant money washing machine on a scale far beyond Al Capone's laundromats. Switzerland, though a pioneer, was not the only tax haven since the 1970s. Small island nations like the Cayman Islands, Panama, Bermuda, the Bahamas, and the British Virgin Islands began to emerge as new offshore financial centers. These places had ideal characteristics for money laundering: low or zero tax rates, strict secrecy laws, and simple company formation procedures. In particular, shell companies became the main tool for hiding the origin of money. A shell company often has no physical office, no employees, and sometimes exists only as a file in a lawyer's office. They are established at low cost, sometimes just a few hundred US dollars, and can be used to open bank accounts, buy real estate, or invest in the stock market without revealing the identity of the true owner. For example, a drug lord in Colombia could establish a shell company in the Cayman Islands, transfer dirty money into the company's account, then use the company to buy a luxury apartment in Miami or invest in a financial fund in London. After a few transfers, the origin of the money was completely hidden. The Panama Papers leak in 2016 exposed the massive scale of shell companies. Millions of documents from the law firm Mossack Fonseca in Panama showed how politicians, businessmen, and criminals used shell companies to hide assets, evade taxes, and launder money. Leaders like Vladimir Putin to entertainment stars, thousands of individuals have taken advantage of the offshore system to protect their assets. Offshore tax havens not only provide shell companies, but also have lax laws that help hide identities and the origin of money. For example, in the Cayman Islands, companies do not need to report the identity of shareholders or directors, and there are no regular audit requirements. This allows dirty money to be transferred through multiple accounts and companies in different countries, creating a financial maze that makes tracing almost impossible. According to the World Bank, offshore tax havens manage about 8 to 10% of global financial assets, equivalent to tens of trillions of US dollars, a significant portion of which has illicit origins. Globalization, with the development of technology and interconnected financial systems, has made money laundering easier than ever. Money can be transferred across borders in a matter of seconds through electronic transactions. And the differences in financial regulations between countries create loopholes that criminals can exploit. For example, a sum of money from drug trafficking in Mexico can be transferred to an account in Panama, then invested in a financial fund in Luxembourg, and finally used to buy real estate in Dubai. Each step in this process blurs the trail of the dirty money. Criminal organizations, from drug cartels like the Sinaloa cartel to terrorist groups like ISIS, all use offshore havens to finance their operations. Similarly, corrupt politicians and tycoons also take advantage of this system to hide assets plundered from state budgets or from shady deals. A typical example is the 1MDB scandal in Malaysia, where billions of US dollars from the National Investment Fund were embezzled and laundered through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland before being used to buy yachts, real estate, and finance Hollywood movies. Globalization also creates a paradox. While offshore tax havens are criticized as places that harbor crime, they are an indispensable part of the global financial system. Many large corporations like Apple, Google, and Amazon use tax havens to legally optimize taxes. Taking advantage of loopholes in international law, this raises the question: are tax havens magical mirrors that turn dirty money into clean money, or just a neutral tool that is abused by both criminals and legitimate businesses? The complexity of the offshore system makes fighting money laundering a huge challenge. Agencies like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the Financial Action Task Force have tried to introduce international standards to increase transparency, such as requiring banks to report suspicious transactions. However, the differences in laws between countries and the lack of cooperation from tax havens make this effort difficult. For example, for many years, Switzerland refused to share account information with other countries, citing its bank secrecy laws. It wasn't until the 2010s, under international pressure, that Switzerland began to loosen its regulations and cooperate with agencies like the US IRS. Similarly, island nations like the Cayman Islands and Panama often only change their laws when faced with major scandals like the Panama Papers. Offshore tax havens show that money laundering is not just a problem of individual crime, but also a part of the global financial system. They exist thanks to a combination of lax laws, advanced financial technology, and the greed of both individuals and organizations. The tricks used, from shell companies to international transfers, are modern versions of the techniques that pirates and mafiosos once used, but on a much larger and more complex scale. Moreover, tax havens raise an ethical question. Can we completely eliminate these havens without harming the global economy? When legitimate companies and criminals all use the same system, how do we distinguish between tax optimization and money laundering? Perhaps every time you hear about a luxury yacht or a penthouse in Dubai, you'll wonder, where did that money come from? What do you think about offshore tax havens? Are they magical mirrors that turn bad things into glittering ones? Or just an inevitable part of the global economy? Do you know any stories about financial scandals related to offshore, like the Panama Papers? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. The next part, we'll enter the digital age, where cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence are reshaping the world of money laundering. The digital age, from transfers to crypto. After leaving the dark alleys of 1920s Chicago and the sun-drenched offshore tax havens, we enter the digital era world where money laundering no longer requires suitcases of cash or paper-based shell companies. This is the age of clicks, lines of code, and complex algorithms. From traditional techniques upgraded by information technology to the explosion of cryptocurrency, criminals have turned money laundering into a sophisticated digital art form. Let's explore how traditional money laundering methods have been reshaped in the new age, and how cryptocurrency, NFTs, and the metaverse have opened a new chapter for the flow of dirty money. The 1980s-20s marked the explosion of information technology and financial globalization. The development of the internet and electronic banking systems allowed money to be transferred across borders in a matter of seconds, creating new opportunities for criminals, but also posing challenges for law enforcement agencies. Here are some traditional money laundering techniques that have been upgraded in the digital age. One of the most common techniques is smurfing, or breaking down transactions into small amounts. Instead of transferring a large sum of money that could attract attention, criminals divide the dirty money into many small amounts, often below the bank's reporting threshold. These funds are sent through dozens or even hundreds of different bank accounts, often under the names of multiple individuals or shell companies. The money is then consolidated in another account, becoming clean and difficult to trace. For example, a drug lord with $1 million in cash can hire a team of Smurfs to deposit amounts of $90 into multiple bank accounts around the world. These funds are then transferred through intermediary accounts in tax havens like the Cayman Islands, before being consolidated into a legitimate investment in real estate or securities. Thanks to the development of international transfer systems like SWIFT, criminals can transfer dirty money from a country with lax laws to major financial centers like New York, London, or Hong Kong. Each transfer creates a layer to hide the origin of the money, a technique called layering. For example, money from drug trafficking in Colombia can be transferred through a bank in Panama, then to an account in Switzerland, and finally invested in a financial fund in Singapore. Each transfer blurs the initial trail, making tracing almost impossible. Online casinos are an ideal money laundering tool in the digital age. Criminals can deposit dirty money into an online casino as a bet, then withdraw it as legitimate winnings. Due to the random nature of gambling, it is very difficult to prove that the withdrawn money had an illicit origin. Some online casinos operate in jurisdictions with lax laws such as Malta or Curacao, further increasing anonymity. In addition, the Hawala underground banking system, a traditional money transfer system popular in the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa, is also used in the digital age. Hawala operates based on trust between brokers, allowing money to be transferred without official bank transactions. For example, a criminal in Dubai can give dirty money to a Hawaladar, and an equivalent amount will be paid in London without leaving a digital trail. The combination of underground banking and modern technology, such as encrypted messaging apps, has made this system even harder to detect. The advent of Bitcoin in 2009 opened a new era for money laundering. Unlike cash or bank transfers, cryptocurrency operates on decentralized blockchains, not controlled by any government. While cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Monero, and digital assets like NFTs and the metaverse bring innovation to finance, they also become ideal tools for criminals. Here's how cryptocurrency is used to launder money. Bitcoin mixers, also known as tumblers, are services that help hide the origin of Bitcoin by mixing transactions from multiple people. When a criminal sends Bitcoin to a mixer, the Bitcoin is combined with the Bitcoin of hundreds or thousands of other people, then sent to a new address. This process makes tracing the origin of Bitcoin extremely difficult, even with advanced blockchain analysis tools. For example, a hacker who steals data and receives Bitcoin as ransom can send that Bitcoin through a mixer like Wasabi Wallet or Tornado Cash. After being mixed, the Bitcoin is transferred to a new wallet and can be exchanged for cash on exchanges like Binance or Coinbase, or used to buy legitimate goods and services, according to a Chainalysis report. Billions of US dollars in Bitcoin related to illicit activities have been processed through mixers in the 2010s. While Bitcoin provides a certain level of anonymity, Monero is specifically designed to optimize privacy. Every Monero transaction uses techniques like ring signatures and stealth addresses, making it impossible to trace the sender, receiver, or transaction amount. This makes Monero a top choice for illicit activities, from drug trafficking on the dark web to terrorist financing. For example, online black markets like Silk Road and Alphabay often accepted Monero to hide transactions. Other anonymous cryptocurrencies like Scash and Dash also offer similar security features. But Monero remains the most popular among criminals due to its simplicity and effectiveness. In recent years, NFTs in the metaverse have opened a new method of money laundering. NFTs are unique digital assets stored on a blockchain, often used to represent digital art, in-game items, or virtual real estate. Criminals can buy an NFT at a low price with dirty money, then resell the NFT at a much higher price to an affiliate or themselves through another wallet. This transaction creates a legitimate transaction history, and the money received from selling the NFT becomes clean money. For example, a criminal can buy an art NFT for $1 with dirty Bitcoin, then resell it for $1 million in a fake auction. The $1 million is now considered legitimate revenue from the sale of a digital asset. According to a Chainalysis report in 2022, millions of US dollars from illicit activities have been laundered through NFT transactions, especially on platforms like OpenSea and the metaverse with virtual worlds like Decentraland and the Sandbox. Is also an ideal environment for money laundering. Criminals can buy virtual land, items, or assets in the metaverse with dirty money, then resell them to receive clean money. Because transactions in the metaverse are often done through the blockchain and are not subject to strict supervision, tracing the origin of money becomes extremely difficult. For example, a piece of virtual land worth millions of US dollars in Decentraland can be bought with illicit Bitcoin and resold to legalize the funds. Imagine a hacker who steals data from a large company and receives 1 Bitcoin as ransom. To launder this money, he takes the following steps. Sends the 1 Bitcoin through a mixer like Tornado Cash, where his Bitcoin is mixed with the Bitcoin of thousands of others. Clean Bitcoin is transferred to a new wallet and exchanged for Monero on a decentralized exchange to increase anonymity. Uses the Monero to buy an NFT on OpenSea, which is promoted as a unique work of art. Then he sells this NFT to another account for 10 times the price, receiving clean money in the form of Ethereum. Finally, the Ethereum is exchanged for cash through a legitimate exchange, or used to buy virtual real estate in the metaverse, completing the money laundering process. This process can be completed in a few days. Tracing the origin of the money is almost impossible for law enforcement agencies. The development of cryptocurrency and digital platforms has posed unprecedented challenges for agencies like the FBI, Europol, and the Financial Action Task Force. Although Bitcoin's blockchain is public and can be analyzed using tools like Chainalysis or Elliptic, anonymous cryptocurrencies like Monero and Mixers make tracing extremely difficult. Furthermore, NFT and metaverse platforms often operate in jurisdictions with lax laws, where regulations have not caught up with technological developments. Law enforcement agencies have tried to introduce countermeasures, such as requiring cryptocurrency exchanges to implement KYC and report suspicious transactions. However, many decentralized exchanges and mixers do not comply with these regulations, and criminals often take advantage of platforms in countries with weak laws, such as Seychelles or Vanuatu. The digital age has transformed money laundering from a physical activity into a digital art form. With unprecedented speed, scale, and anonymity, techniques like smurfing, international transfers, underground banking are a continuation of the methods that mafiosos and pirates once used. But cryptocurrency, NFTs, and the metaverse have taken everything to a new level. These tools not only serve criminals, but are also used by legitimate individuals and organizations, creating a blurry line between clean and dirty in the financial world. The question is, in a world where money is no longer physical, how do we distinguish between clean and dirty money? And when technology develops faster than the law, can we control the flow of dirty money? Perhaps the next time you see an NFT selling for millions of US dollars or a piece of virtual land in the metaverse, you'll ask yourself, is that a legitimate transaction or just a loop in the digital money laundering machine? What do you think about how cryptocurrency and NFTs are changing the world of money laundering? Can we build a more transparent digital financial system, or is this just an endless race between criminals and law enforcement? Do you know any stories about money laundering cases involving Bitcoin, NFTs, or the metaverse? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you're interested in the secrets behind the flow of money, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to continue this journey of discovery with us. In the next part, we'll look at the future, where artificial intelligence and blockchain may reshape both the financial and criminal worlds. Stay tuned. The future of dirty money. After our long journey from the cobbled streets of medieval Florence, through the smoke-filled alleys of 1920s Chicago, to the sun-drenched offshore tax havens, we have witnessed how dirty money has infiltrated every corner of history and technology. Now we stand on the threshold of the future world, where money laundering is no longer a battle between people, but a confrontation between machines, algorithms, and the most advanced technologies. In this final part, we'll explore the future of dirty money, the role of central bank digital currencies, and profound questions about the true nature of money. Can technology end the flow of dirty money, or will it just create new covers for it? One of the solutions that governments and central banks around the world are pinning their hopes on to fight money laundering is the central bank digital currency. Unlike decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Monero, a CBDC is digital money issued and controlled by a central bank, operating on a centralized ledger. With a CBDC, every transaction is recorded and can be traced, offering the potential for more stringent financial surveillance. Countries like China, Sweden, and the Bahamas have deployed or are testing CBDCs, while countries like the US and the EU are actively researching them. In theory, a CBDC could be a powerful tool to combat money laundering for the following reasons. Transparency. Every transaction is recorded on a ledger managed by the central bank, making it easy for law enforcement agencies to trace the flow of money. Centralized control. Unlike a decentralized blockchain, CBDC allows the government to monitor and intervene in suspicious transactions. Reduced use of cash. Cash is the primary means for money laundering and activities like smuggling or corruption. A CBDC, being entirely digital, can reduce dependence on cash, thereby limiting underground transactions. For example, if a drug lord tries to transfer $1 million using a CBDC, agencies like the Financial Action Task Force or the Federal Bureau of Investigation could track this transaction in real time. Determining the origin and destination of the funds, this creates a major barrier to traditional money laundering techniques like smurfing or using shell companies. However, a CBDC is not a silver bullet that can completely eradicate money laundering. Financial criminals are always one step ahead of the law, and they are leveraging advanced technologies to circumvent surveillance systems. Here are some of the challenges. Adversarial AI. Criminals use artificial intelligence to analyze the surveillance models of a CBDC, thereby finding ways to hide transactions. For example, AI can create fake transaction patterns to deceive anti-money laundering algorithms. Deepfakes and fake identities. Deepfake technology allows criminals to create fake identities to open CBDC accounts, thereby hiding their true identity. A fake video or voice can be used to bypass KYC verification requirements. Reversible blockchains and decentralized cryptocurrencies. While a CBDC is centralized, decentralized cryptocurrencies like Monero or other anonymous blockchains will still exist in parallel. Criminals can transfer dirty money from a CBDC to these cryptocurrencies, then use services like mixers to blur the trail. Underground systems outside of CBDC, systems like Hawala or peer-to-peer trading platforms that don't use a CBDC, can still be used to transfer dirty money, especially in areas with loose regulations. Furthermore, the implementation of a CBDC also raises issues of privacy. If every transaction is monitored by the government, people may be concerned about excessive surveillance, leading to public opposition. This could make a CBDC difficult to be widely accepted, creating an opportunity for alternative financial systems to continue to exist. While a CBDC promises to enhance surveillance, criminals are also using advanced technologies to upgrade the art of money laundering. Here are some tools and methods that criminals may use in the future. AI for money laundering. AI is not just a tool for law enforcement, but also a weapon for criminals. AI algorithms can analyze AML systems. AI can study the surveillance models of banks or governments and then propose ways to transfer money to avoid detection. For example, AI can determine the maximum transaction threshold before triggering an AML alarm. Automate money laundering. AI can automatically break down transactions and transfer money through thousands of accounts in a few seconds, far exceeding human processing capabilities. Create fake transactions. AI can generate fake transactions to disrupt blockchain analysis systems, making tracing more difficult. For example, a criminal organization could use AI to create millions of small transactions through cryptocurrency wallets, flooding the surveillance systems of exchanges like Coinbase, making them unable to distinguish what is a legitimate transaction. Deepfake technology. Deepfake technology, which uses AI to create fake videos, images, or voices, is becoming a major threat. Criminals can use deepfakes to bypass the KYC procedures of banks or cryptocurrency exchanges. For example, a money launderer could create a fake video of a legitimate businessman to open a CBDC or bank account, then use this account to transfer dirty money. Anonymous blockchains. While public blockchains like Bitcoin can be analyzed, anonymous blockchains like Monero or mixing services like Tornado Cash remain a major challenge. In the future, criminals may develop reversible blockchain systems specifically designed to hide transactions from the start. With more advanced encryption protocols, NFTs and the metaverse. Digital assets like NFTs and virtual real estate in the metaverse will continue to be tools for money laundering in the future. With the explosion of platforms like Decentraland, the Sandbox, and new NFT marketplaces, criminals can buy and sell digital assets at inflated values to legalize dirty money. For example, a piece of virtual land worth millions of US dollars can be bought with illicit Bitcoin and resold to receive clean money. Because these transactions take place on the blockchain and are often not subject to strict surveillance, they become a new money laundering paradise. Our journey through the history of money laundering, from the treasures of 16th century pirates through the laundromats of Al Capone to offshore tax havens and the world of cryptocurrency, shows one thing: dirty money always finds a way to infiltrate the legitimate financial system. Although technology changes from medieval bills of exchange to modern blockchains, the nature of dirty money remains the same. It just wears new covers, tells new stories. In the future, as artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the metaverse continue to shape the financial world, the question is, can we create a truly transparent financial system where dirty money has no place to hide? Or is dirty money just an inseparable part of the financial system, where human greed and ingenuity will always find a way to outsmart the law? Next time you hold a bill, scroll through your bank account balance, or see a Bitcoin transaction on the blockchain, ask yourself, where has this bill, this number, been? Has it ever been in the hands of a pirate, a mafioso, or an anonymous hacker? Perhaps money is never truly clean, it just changes its story from one century to the next. What do you think about the future of dirty money in the digital age? Can a CBDC and surveillance technology end the flow of dirty money? Or will criminals always be one step ahead? Do you have any ideas on how to create a more transparent financial system? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you're interested in the secrets behind the flow of money, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to continue this journey of discovery with us. The story of dirty money hasn't ended, and we will continue to follow the new chapters of this story.
You've crossed the story. You felt every pulse in the dark, and I was there with you, quietly, Always. That's why I left behind one last thing. Not to explain, not to impress, just to stay with you a little longer. A song I chose with care, as if tucking you in from across time and space. So go on, lay back, the music knows where to take you.